In the Heights tells a story of a sympathetic New York bodega owner who saves every penny every day as he imagines and sings about a better life. Although In the Heights is getting critical acclaim, there's been some deep conversations about the film and Latinx representation in media altogether. Hi everyone, my name is John, and I'm going to be talking about this subject that seems to be getting bigger and bigger. Here's a disclaimer, I do have my notes in front of me that I'm going to be reading from because I have some major points that I want to cover, and I just want to make sure everything gets touched on. Black-oriented magazine The Root recently put out an article titled, "Let's Talk About In the Heights and the Erasure of Dark-Skinned Afro-Latinx Folks." It was accompanied with a video of director John M. Chu and some of the cast getting asked about the lack of lead dark-skinned Afro-Latinx people in the movie. The video quickly circulated on Twitter. Before I talk about this article and the video and my thoughts on this subject, I just want to clarify some terms that I'll be using throughout the video. I'll be using Latinx, Latino, Latinidad, and Latin interchangeably. And I'll be using Afro-Latinx, Black Latinx, Afro-Latino, and Black Latino interchangeably. I want to start off by saying that I absolutely love this film. I went to an early screening, I watched it in theaters a week later, I just watched it on HBO Max, and I'll most likely watch it again after making this video. With that being said, even things that we love aren't above criticism. So let's dive into it. To understand the erasure of Afro-Latinx people from Latinx media, it's important to identify both of these terms. Latinx consists of all people from Latin America. Afro-Latinx also consists of people from Latin America, but come from significant or mainly African ancestry. Here's a snippet of The Root's Felice Leon breaking down a little of that history. She explains this way better than I ever can.
Damn! It derived from the word Latino, which was first seen in California newspapers in the 1850s. Forget what you heard. The words Latino and Hispanic are completely different. According to scholars, Hispanic links Latin Americans to Spain, its cultures and traditions, with an emphasis on the language. So folks who are actually from Spain would be considered Hispanic. But this wouldn't be the case for Brazilians, for example, because they speak Portuguese. On the other hand, the term Latinx refers to people from countries south of the United States. Latinx people share the experience of being colonized. Colonizers are not included in Latinidad.
Don't scare me like that, colonizer.
And while for some the term Latinidad is associated with pride, mainly white Latinx folks, for others it's become associated with oppression. To understand why some millennials in the US are rejecting the term, you gotta understand the history. Let's take it back a couple of centuries to what's now known as Latin America. Now, we done told y'all about the transatlantic slave trade some 11 times on this series, but stick with me. During the slave trade, over 10.5 million enslaved people arrived in the Americas. And slave ships made multiple stops before arriving upon these North American shores. In fact, over 90% of the enslaved were dropped off in the Caribbean and South America. And even after emancipation in the various Latin American countries, the treatment of Black people in those spaces was no better.
I'm going to link this video down below because I think it's an interesting watch, just in general. Let's get back to this article that was also written by Felice Leon. In the Heights, the highly anticipated TV adaptation of the hit Broadway musical from Lin-Manuel Miranda, directed by John M. Chu, dropped this trailer over a year ago and folks had questions. In some, where are all the leading dark-skinned Afro-Latinx folks? Here's what John M. Chu had to say about the topic when asked.
From New York City, it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge the fact that most of your principal actors were light-skinned or white-passing Latinx people. So with that, what are your thoughts on the lack of Black Latinx people represented in your film?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was something we talked about and I needed to be educated about, of course. In the end, you know, when we were looking at the cast, we tried to get the people who were best for those roles, and that specifically, and we saw a lot of people like Daphne or Dasha. But I hear you on, you know, trying to fill those cast members with darker skin. I think that's a really good conversation to have. Something that we should all be talking about.
To give the film credit, a lot of surrounding atmosphere was filled with all shades of people. From the dancers to salon workers to the everyday neighborhood people, It's honestly the most realistic melting pot city portrayal I've ever seen in a major blockbuster. Here's what Felice Leon had to say about that, though.
Did you not see that in the dancers as well?
Those are roles that historically we've been able to fill, right? We've been able to be the dancers, and we've been able to be in the hair salons and, this and that. But like a lead, that's the breakthrough. We want to see Black people in the Heights. We want to see Afro-Panamanians, Black Cubans, Black Dominicans. That's what we want to see, and that's what, we were yearning for and hoping for.
Again, you might be saying, what's the big deal? It's impossible to represent every single person and culture in one project. Well, In the Heights is telling the story of Latinos in Washington Heights. That's already a very specific group of people. Geographically speaking, Hispanics and Latinos make up about 70% of Washington Heights. Of that 70%, a lot of them are Dominican and Puerto Rican. And uncoincidentally, the main characters of In the Heights are Dominican and Puerto Rican. According to Pew Research, up to 90% of Dominicans come from African descent. And according to a study from U.S. National Science Foundation, about 61% of all Puerto Ricans have indigenous DNA and 27% have African DNA. So the issue really isn't about cultural representation more than it is about colorism. A Huffington Post article from 2016 titled 9 Famous Faces on the Struggles and Beauty of Being Afro-Latino shares the stories of Afro-Latinx actors and their experiences with colorism in Hollywood. I'll share some excerpts of the article on the screen, so feel free to pause and read them. This conversation goes far beyond In the Heights. As you can see, many Afro-Latinx actors have been dealing with colorism and typecasting for pretty much all of their careers. As I'm putting this video together, Lin-Manuel Miranda just put out a statement regarding colorism in his film. Will put that on the screen, so feel free to pause and read that. I think this serves as a good place to insert my personal opinion on the subject. I'm an aspiring screenwriter, and I put a huge emphasis on highlighting Afro-Latinx people in my work because I haven't seen it growing up. I'm half Dominican and half Puerto Rican. I grew up in a Spanish-speaking Pentecostal church. I went to a 97% Hispanic populated elementary, middle, and high school, but I never fully felt comfortable in my Latin circles because I've never really seen it portrayed in media. People that look like me in media. I didn't even realize I had African ancestry until my stepfather told me, and he happens to have a degree in history. So being Afro-Latino, I identify being 100% Latino and 100% Black. I do understand that not all Afro-Latinos identify the same way. So just know when I say that, that is my personal identification. In the Heights could have been that film to break the glass ceiling for Afro-Latinx people in media because it focused on a very specific group of people who in actuality are darker skinned Afro-Latinx people. End result, I still believe In the Heights is worth the watch. It's a celebration of Latinx culture that I am still proud to be a part of. I'm actually not on board with the boycott of the film that some Twitter users seem to be doing. Defeats the whole purpose. All I want to do is to keep this conversation going in hopes that some serious change happens within Latinx and American media. And I think that's all I have right now, but I would love to hear what you have to say. So feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. All my references and sources will also be linked below, along with extra videos and articles revolving around this topic. And like I said, this topic is continuing to grow and grow. So as more articles and statements and videos come out, I'll be adding them to the description. So feel free to come back to the video and look for those links. With that being said, hasta luego, mi gente.